Here's something my daddy used to tell me when I was a kid, helping him in the garden, and I didn't believe it until I'd wasted about 3 full seasons proving him right. He'd say, "Son, half the vegetables people plant in full sun are miserable out there. They're just too polite to tell you." I thought he was pulling my leg. Turns out, he was dead on. I spent years baking perfectly good lettuce into bitter garbage and wondering why my spinach bolted in 10 days flat, when the whole time the answer was sitting in the shady corner of the yard I'd been ignoring. So today I'm walking you through 10 vegetables that actually hate the blazing sun. Most gardening books tell you they need and thrive, and I mean really explode, when you tuck them into partial or even deep shade. These are the crops that can turn that shady strip along the north side of your house, or the spot under the maple tree, into some of the most productive real estate on your property. And stick around to the end, because the last one on this list is a vegetable I swore would never grow for me until I accidentally planted it in the shadiest corner of my yard. And it's been feeding my family for 9 years straight now. I'm also going to share one bonus trick at the end, a way to create shade on purpose using plants you're already growing, that honestly doubled my cool season harvest once I started doing it. All right, let me back up for a second and tell you why this works, because it's not some gardening myth. It comes down to plant biology. A lot of the vegetables we grow are what horticulturists call cool season crops, and their leaves were never designed to handle hours of direct 90-degree sun. When the soil gets too warm and the light gets too intense, they trigger what's called bolting, where the plant decides it's time to flower and make seed before it dies. That turns your leaves bitter and tough overnight. I used to fight this every spring, blaming my seeds or my soil, until I finally read a Cornell extension piece that explained the whole thing in about 2 paragraphs. Shade isn't a handicap for these plants. For a lot of them, it's exactly what they evolved for. Yeah, once I got that through my thick head, my whole garden changed. Let me show you what I mean, starting with the one most of us have ruined at least once. You know, the first one had to be lettuce, because I bet my best pair of pruners that everyone listening has grown bitter, bolted lettuce at some point. I sure have. I used to plant my romaine right out in the middle of the yard, 6 full hours of sun, and by mid-May it tasted like chewing on aspirin. The fix is embarrassingly simple. Give lettuce no more than 3 to 4 hours of morning sun and shade for the rest of the day. I plant varieties like Jericho, Muir, and Butter Crunch along the east side of my tomato row now, and they stay sweet and crisp all the way into July. The science is straightforward. Lettuce wants soil temps under 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and shade keeps it there. Once you taste lettuce grown the right way, you won't go back. Spinach is lettuce's cranky cousin, and it's even less forgiving. I had a neighbor ask me one time why his spinach bolted in 2 weeks, and when I walked over, I about laughed, because he planted it right against a south-facing white fence. That's a solar oven, not a garden bed. Spinach wants dappled shade and cool feet. I plant mine under the skirts of my pole bean trellis, so by the time the beans leaf out, the spinach is getting filtered afternoon shade. Bloomsdale Longstanding is the variety I swear by. You'll pull leaves for 6 weeks longer than your full sun neighbors, and that's no exaggeration. Now arugula, this one I figured out by pure accident. I had some seed left over one spring and scattered it under a dogwood tree I'd been meaning to limb up. Forgot all about it. 3 weeks later, I went back there and found the best arugula I'd ever grown. Deep. Green, wide leaves. None of that burnt peppery kick that means the plant's stressed. Arugula in full sun tastes like punishment. In shade, it tastes like arugula is supposed to taste, a little nutty and mild. Give it about 3 hours of morning light and nothing else. Astro and Sylvetta are 2 varieties that handle shade beautifully. Let me pause right here. If you're already thinking about corners of your yard you'd written off as useless, good, That's the whole point of this video. Hit that subscribe button so these tips keep showing up when you need them, and let's keep going. Because the next ones are where it gets really interesting. Bok choy is a vegetable I was scared of for years, because every time I grew it in full sun, it bolted before the heads could even form. I'd end up with these pathetic little stalks, topped with yellow flowers. The breakthrough came when I stuck a row of it behind my trellis cucumbers, where it got maybe 2 hours of direct sun a day. Those plants form fat, glossy heads at the size of softballs. Bok choy is a brassica that originated in cooler Asian climates, and it absolutely cannot tolerate heat stress. Keep it in shade, keep the soil moist, and harvest the outer leaves as they grow. Toy choy and joy choy are two varieties I'd recommend starting with. Peas are the one that really surprises folks because every seed packet says full sun. Here's the truth, nobody prints on the back of that packet. Peas in full sun, once temperatures climb past 75 degrees, start shutting down pollination, and the pods get tough and starchy. I started planting my sugar snaps on the east side of my corn block about 4 seasons ago, where they get strong morning sun and then hide behind the corn by noon. Doubled my harvest window easily. Sugar Ann and Cascadia are reliable varieties. You'll get a good 3 extra weeks of picking. Swiss chard is tough, I'll give it that, but tough doesn't mean happy. In full sun, the leaves get, in full, leathery and the colors fade out. I grow Bright Lights and Ford Hook Giant in a spot that only gets about 4 hours of morning sun, and those stems glow like stained glass. Red, yellow, pink. The whole rainbow. Chard is one of those plants that'll tell you what it wants if you pay attention. Wilted midday leaves, too much sun, deep, firm, brightly colored stems. You nailed it. Scallions and bunching onions get overlooked on lists like this, but they're a shade workhorse. I tuck them in around the base of my pepper plants, where they get partial sun, and they grow tall and tender all season. Evergreen Hardy White is the variety my dad grew, and it's still the one I grow today, 50 years later. They're the definition of a set it and forget it crop once you realize they don't want baking heat. Broccoli is a crop I struggled with for about 5 seasons before I finally accepted what the evidence was telling me. Full sun in summer equals tiny, quick bolting heads and loose flowery. Disappointment. I moved my broccoli to a bed that gets morning sun and then afternoon shade from my house, and the heads I pull now are dense, heavy, and sweet. Waltham 29 is the old standby, and DeSico gives you side shoots for weeks. A University of Georgia extension study I came across a while back showed broccoli yield improvements of up to 30% in partial shade during summer plantings. That's not a small difference. That's the whole reason you grow the crop. Kale. Now, kale can handle more sun than most on this list, but the kale you grow in shade is a different animal entirely. Sweeter, more tender, without that bitter, waxy chew that makes people say they don't like kale. I grow Red Russian and lacinato, what folks call dinosaur kale, in a 3-hour morning sun spot, and I've had kale plants last me well over a year. One plant, 14 months of harvest. Shade-grown kale doesn't stress, doesn't bolt, and doesn't fight you. All right, this is the one I teased at the beginning. Rhubarb. And I know, technically we eat the stalks and treat it like a fruit, but botanically it's a vegetable. And it's the single most transformative plant I've ever shade gardened. Here's my story with rhubarb. When I first moved to the property I'm on now, about 9 years ago, I planted 3 crowns in a sunny raised bed because every reference I'd read said full sun. Within 2 summers, those plants were pathetic. Thin stalks, leaves scorched around the edges, barely worth harvesting. I was ready to rip them out. My wife's aunt, who grew up on a farm in Wisconsin, came to visit and took one look at my setup and said, "Mark, why on earth is your rhubarb in the sun? We always grew ours on the north side of the barn." I didn't believe her at first, but I moved one crown to a shady spot behind my garden shed where it gets maybe 90 minutes of direct light in the morning and nothing else. Just as an experiment, that plant took off. By the next spring, it was producing stalks as thick as my thumb. 2 feet long, ruby red, tart, and sweet at the same time. I moved the other 2 crowns, and within a year, I had more rhubarb than I knew what to do with. 9 years later, that patch still feeds my family, fills the freezer, and supplies every pie, crumble, and jar of jam I can stand to make. Rhubarb evolved in cool northern climates and wants cool, moist soil above all else. Shade gives it exactly that. If you've ever struggled with rhubarb or written it off, plant Victoria or Canada Red in the shadiest corner you've got. You will be stunned. Now, before I share that bonus tip, let me talk about a few common mistakes that tie all of this together, because I made every one of these myself. First, there's this widespread belief that full sun equals full flavor. It doesn't. For cool season crops, full sun usually equals stress, bitterness, and bolting. The better approach is knowing which crops tolerate sun and which ones need protection from it. Second mistake, treating the shady parts of the yard as dead zones. I did this for years. Looked at that strip along the north fence and thought, well, nothing grows there. Meanwhile, that strip could have been feeding me salads every week. Reframe shade as opportunity, not limitation. Third one, planting everything in the same bed, expecting it to all thrive together. Sun-loving tomatoes and shade-loving lettuce have no business sharing the same real estate unless you're using the tomatoes to shade the lettuce on purpose, which, wouldn't you know it, is exactly the bonus tip I'm about to share. Here it is. The single best way to grow shade-loving vegetables in a sun-drenched yard is to let your tall crops do the shading for you. I call it living shade. Plant a row of pole beans, sweet corn, or indeterminate tomatoes oriented east to west, and then tuck your lettuce, spinach, bok choy, and scallions along the north side of that row. By the time the tall crop hits 3 or 4 feet, it'll cast a gentle moving shadow all afternoon, right where your cool season crops need it most. I started doing this about 6 seasons ago, and my summer lettuce harvest literally doubled. No shade cloth, no special structures, just smart planning. Try a row of Kentucky Wonder Pole beans with butter crunch lettuce tucked underneath, and you'll see what I mean in about 3 weeks. If this kind of straight talk gardening is what you're after, do me a favor and hit subscribe so you catch the next video, and drop me a comment telling me which of these 10 vegetables you're going to try in shade first, or if there's one I missed that's been a surprise winner in your own garden. I read every comment, and I've learned more from this community than from any book on my shelf. So remember what my daddy told me. Half those vegetables are too polite to complain about the sun. Now you know which ones. Go find that shady corner, plant something in it this week, and I'll see you in the next video. Happy gardening.